rules, right?
Right.
And
But now it has respectability?
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So what did Harold Moy?
Well, there are a couple of choices.
here.
You know, you could develop your knight to c3. There are a few other things you could do, but the most common response here, or you could push this pawn to e5
Right.
if you wanted. The most common response is to white simply takes the pawn.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's-
Now
yeah.
you have now black. You have choices here.
Right. The two major choices here are playing knight out to attack the pawn,
On f6. Yep.
or queen takes, which is what I played.
All right.
All right, and this is where, like as you say, especially a lot of the beginners' books recommend against it because the rule of thumb is don't get your queen out too early because it becomes a target, gets
Right.
kicked around the board,
Yep.
because everything else, you know, it's the strongest piece on the board, so it means it becomes a target for all the lesser pieces,
Right.
which is exactly what happens. White takes the knight on c1, b1 rather, moves it to c3, threatening the queen.
Which is the most typical move.
Right.
So the queen has to move.
Queen has to move.
All right. So the question is where?
And now, in the old days, this was, I think, typically
Or
what was
retreating
played.
to.
But then it almost looks like, well, so why did black
Exactly.
bother? You know?
Yeah,
right.
But I mean, there is a strategy to it. I realize,
Right.
but-
Okay.
And then, for a long time, this was the standard.
Right. Queen a5.
Queen
is-
a5,
yeah.
whereas now it's about 50-50 between queen a5 and queen d6.
All right. So those are the three major
Right.
retreating moves. Yeah.
And checking the king, by the way, doesn't
Yes.
really work very well because
Right,
white
right.
simply just
Right.
can continue his
Because
development.
that queen will be harassed again.
Yeah.
An early check like that is totally meaningless.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
All right. So
Okay, so you
you
moved
played
to-
queen a5.
Which
Queen
was-
a5,
Okay.
which is a standard move.
All right.
And so white white already attacks two squares in the center. He wants to continue to build up the center, open up lines, and so plays the pawn on d2 to d4.
Right.
Okay.
Which
Oh,
again,
yeah.
very standard
It opens up the diagonal for that dark squared bishop.
for the bishop, and also, gives you the chance to
Yes.
put the bishop
Unpin
there.
the knight, yeah.
Okay. So what did
Indirectly
you do?
attack.
What did you do now?
Just standard developing move.
All right.
Again, very common.
And again, here, you know, white had now at this point, white has a number of choices. He can
Right.
develop the king's knight to f3. He can play the bishop to c4. He can play the dark squared bishop to f4. You know, if he wants. In this case, white played the bishop on c1 to d2 as his
Okay.
fifth move.
Which again, that's fairly common.
Right.
Sure, and it you know, it unpins the knight and threatens a sort of a discovered move
Right.
on the
because
queen.
now, right, the
Yes,
knight can
right.
come in here.
Yeah,
attacking
yeah.
the
Actually, he
queen,
would be
or-
white would be threatening by moving that knight. Could actually eliminate the knight and, in fact, force
Right.
a doubling of the pawns
Right.
on the king side.
Right.
All right. So what do you, as black, have to do in response to bishop d2?
Again, this is fairly standard. This is to give the queen an escape route. Be able to pull the queen
So it
back
can
here.
escape along that diagonal.
necessary.
d5 to d8. Okay.
At this stage of the game, white is going to continue his development. So for his sixth move, he moves the knight on g1 to f3.
All right. Now white still has the lead in development, of course.
Yep.
So black has to try to catch up here.
Right. So I just continue my development.
Okay. Bishop f5.
Five.
Now, was it possible to play the bishop to g4 and,
Right.
pin that knight? That was a possibility, I'm sure.
Right. And that used to be the more common move
In the old days.
in the old days.
Right.
The olden days.
But nowadays,
Nowadays, this tends to be more common.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so
And white now white has to decide whether he wants to castle queenside or kingside. If he wants to castle queenside, he needs to move his queen so that space is clear. He's decided he wants to castle on the king side. He develops his f1 bishop to c4. It attacks. It's on this important diagonal that attacks towards the f7 pawn.
Right.
all right.
One of the interesting things about the Scandinavian is that both sides can easily castle either way.
Right.
Right. So,
All right, so
it's a decision black has to make
Right.
also as to which way to castle.
all right, so now it's your seventh move coming up.
Seventh move, and this does two things. One, it opens this line up for the bishop to develop, and it blunts the attack of the the bishop on this
So
square.
E6 allows, yeah, it opens up, yes, for that dark squared bishop.
Yeah.
Okay, so for White's eighth move now, he's cleared the way for a kingside castling, which is exactly what he does. Castles kingside, puts the king to a safer spot. It brings the rook more to the center of the board.
Although he could have played the queen to E2.
He could have played
Right.
E2 and then
followed by
castled
queenside castling.
Right,
So he
right.
had that option
still had that
of castling along, as they say,
Right.
Yep.
queenside.
Yep.
All right, so what did you do in response to White's castling here?
Now here, I played a move that probably wasn't best. I played this.
Bishop
and
B4, yeah?
Yeah.
The reason I did it pretty much is just laziness, I think, because one of the nice things about the Scandinavian is that, assuming White plays typical moves, it's pretty much just a standard setup
Okay.
for Black, where the knight goes here, the bishop there, this bishop goes here, the knight goes here, and so what I did is I just played the standard move.
Standard move, right.
If I had stopped to think about it, I might not have played that. Could have played just bishop here or here.
Or more actively there. That's
Right.
a more active placement there.
Right, but like I say, this was just done out of habit. Might
so
not
you-
have been best.
So you were responding to a familiar pattern, but
Yes.
the specific position on the board
Right.
actually turns it into a questionable move.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what did
But
White
in fact,
do?
when we looked in the databases, it was relatively rare that bishop to bishop
Right.
B4
Right.
has been played. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for his ninth move, White plays the pawn on A2 to A3, threatening the bishop.
Right.
So this is going to force
And then I take the knight on
Right.
C3.
Now,
bishop takes C3.
most players would, as White, I would almost automatically again,
Right.
I would play bishop takes on C3.
Right, which is what I expected he was going
Yes.
to do.
Right, that's what you would see
Yeah,
probably.
right.
And then, the nice thing about that.
Which is a logical
Right.
response.
It,
Yeah,
it
reply,
attacks the
right.
queen, it bends the pawn,
Right,
Right.
exactly.
opens up down here.
Forces the queen to move. Yeah,
Right,
Right.
that-
right.
The,
So
the
that-
good thing about it from my point of view is that if he had taken that way, well, now this bishop is sort of blocked by the pawn.
Right.
This pawn has a difficult time moving up.
Right, because you control, actually, you have total control of the D5 square
Right,
in this position.
right.
Right. So it's what I expected him to do.
But he didn't.
That's not what he did.
Right.
So what did he do?
He takes the pawn on, for his 10th move, he takes the pawn on B2, plays to B4, attacking the queen.
Right.
All right.
And at first, I remember him doing that, and I was thinking, okay, that's a surprise.
Yes.
And then I was looking at it, and I was thinking, wait, so he's just going to give me a pawn here.
All right. Is that the first thing you thought of? I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to cost him a pawn?
It's going to
Yeah.
cost him a pawn. And then I was thinking, well, is
Yeah.
it worth it? It's always the question with a gambit. It's like,
Right.
especially a player of his strength, he's not just giving it up without
Yeah.
thinking. There's a reason why he's doing it.
Okay.
And
So
again, in retrospect,
Yeah.
it might have been best if I hadn't taken the pawn.
And just retreat
if
the
I
queen.
had just retreated the queen, say to
C7,
here.
yes.
Nice safe spot. But I did take it. And, they say the best way to refute a gambit is to accept
Accept
it.
it. Right.
And basically see, okay, what have you got?
So now White recaptures the bishop, again threatening the queen.
And he took it with the bishop instead of taking it with the pawn, having the rook attack the queen, because this bishop on b4 now is preventing you from castling
Castling kingside, yeah.
kingside. All right, so now the queen has to move now because it's under
Right.
attack. So where did you go with this queen?
I think I just went to C7.
C7.
Queen
right?
C7, okay.
And then
Which is reasonable.
White advances the A pawn, and it looks like what he wants to do is simply to prevent the B pawn to come
Right.
into B.
That was your threat, wasn't it? If you had not
Yeah.
played a4, you would have
Right.
carried out b5 and attacked the bishop on on
Right.
c4. Okay, so what did you do in response to a4?
What did I do?
As you see, there's a knight on b8 that needs development.
Right. So again, this is
Right.
a fairly standard move in the Scandinavians to develop the knight to here.
And then White centralizes his rook. The king can't castle, so the rook is
Yeah.
right on the.
Because the rook has no future on f1.
Right.
The rook has to try to seize, an open or a semi-open file. All right, so what did you do now in response?
Okay. So C5,
Okay, so
which is going to allow
forking
me
the two.
to castle, hopefully.
So he captures.
Yeah, d takes
captures.
c5.
And then, again, looking at it in retrospect, probably what I should have done is castled right now.
Now that the pawn on c5 is blocking
Right.
White's
Right.
bishop on b4.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was saying before, this game could be a chess public service announcement, which is, chess players, don't let this happen to you, castle early.
Castle early.
Be
All right,
safe.
so the lesson we learned is castle early as possible. Yeah.
So in retrospect, that probably would have been the best thing to do. That it would have been a much different game if I had castled right there.
But instead,
Instead, I
you
recaptured.
recaptured.
And that allows bishop to b5 check.
Yes.
Right. And now the king cannot move to get at it, or can
Well,
it?
it can.
Well, yes, it
can.
can. Yes, the
To
king
F8.
actually in this
Could.
position now could move over to f8
And
Yeah,
that
seeing that
might
it's-
have been
It looks a little awkward, but it works, I
Right.
think, yeah.
and making actually and maybe hiding maybe on the g7.
Seven,
If you play the pawn,
Right, pawn up and
g6
king over.
and hide, having the king hide on
Right.
g7.
But that's not what you did.
All
But
right.
again,
Yes.
it's like Marty said, it's not the sort of thing you would think of immediately. It's
No.
like,
Right.
that seems like an ugly move.
Because you're still holding out hope.
wouldn't
Maybe
really
you can castle at some point.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you need to deal with the castling. You're going to bring the knight back.
Right.
Okay. So white takes the knight on
Yeah.
f3, plays to e5. Now
Now I
increasing the
realize,
pressure.
okay.
There's the queen, the knight, and the bishop are now on.
So we
that.
got a threefold attack on that.
And now
right?
I'm realizing, this doesn't look too good. Because I got a knight being attacked, it's pinned, I can't move it.
Right, exactly. So now, now I'm looking at queenside castling. Is that too dangerous? I mean,
Yeah, it seems like it is, because he's got this open file right
all right.
here.
So this is dangerous because he's actually has a lot of.
And I've played a lot of Scandinavian games where I
Right, so-
castle queenside and get hammered.
all right. So if you learn from past experience
Yeah.
that queenside castling comes
So,
with
I just played rook over.
danger.
Okay.
There's another guard for the knight.
All right. So
And
another
now-
defense.
Brings the rook up to a3. This is a strong move. It not only gives a lot
Yeah.
of play along the third rank, but he can place it anywhere he wants and add more pressure to the position.
All right.
And
So
I hadn't foreseen that.
all right.
And
So
I thought at this point, I think I was still thinking I was okay,
all right.
which is
So
questionable.
you're looking for ways to block all this pressure.
Right.
Right. And so, I was thinking he's going to bring the rook to here.
Well,
So-
maybe not there with the bishop on f5, but maybe
Oh, I'm
the,
sorry,
maybe the
yeah,
C.
that's
but
right.
but if he goes to c3,
threaten the queen.
then he's threatening
Right.
the queen.
So anyway.
Right.
So-
So this
Right.
prevents that.
That prevents that. Or
And
prevents,
it
yeah.
also eases some of the pressure along here.
Right.
Okay. But
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 But-
instead, this is the unexpected move.
This is kind of the wisdom of putting this rook on e1. You always wonder, like, well, why did they
Yeah.
take the time to do that?
Right.
He can play the kind of surprising queen take the knight on d5.
right. And now that just this position here is one that's in the book.
Yeah.
This is
So
okay. So
it's white to move.
Right.
What's
Right.
the winning move?
What's the winning
All right.
move?
And the winning move
Is
all right,
is
so this
that.
is the tactic. This is the
Yep.
tactical position from the book,
Yeah. And
followed by some additional
Yeah,
positions
additional.
from the
Right.
game.
And I don't
So-
know that I have much choice here other than to take back.
Right.
All
But
right.
at this point, I'm
So e
just
take-
about lost.
e takes d5.
Now there's nothing between the rook and the king except this, so he plays knight take the knight on d7, discovered check from the rook.
Yes.
Yep.
King can't move because
Right.
of the bishop and can't take the knight because of this bishop.
So there's only one choice,
There's only one move. The block.
So,
Yeah.
a block.
The block.
and this is another position in the
Then
book.
the
is,
next
how do you-
startling, and this is really nifty. Plays the knight on d7 to f6, double check. The knight checks the king, the bishop checks the king. King can't go anywhere.
Right.
And
And this is.
And I didn't see it
checkmate.
coming. Even after he moved it, it took me a second to realize.
So this is a pretty.
That's
it. Well, it's a pretty checkmate.
Oh, it is.
A double check, a discovered check, doing that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you learn from this game. This tactic that was performed on you.
Yeah.
Taught you.
Let's hope I've learned from this.
You learned that. Well, I think, as you said, the tactics. Producing this book on tactics has actually helped you immensely, and it should help our viewers out there who play chess, who want to learn the game.
So remember the title.
Yes.
Don't play chess
Don't play like
me.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, Chess
Here's an
Chat fans, we
example.
hope you enjoyed the game that Dave Couture presented with Marty and me on this edition of Chess Chat. We hope you would join us next time for another interesting game on Chess Chat. See you next time.
Thanks for coming, Dave.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.